And as the White House scrambles to get a hold of the crisis at the border, reforms are underway. Tonight, our fact-check team separating fact from fiction on this developing issue.
Make it just one day after the White House acknowledged more than 12,000 migrants had crossed our southern border, renewed calls for immigration reform. And that's tonight's fact check. We are investigating current and former immigration policies and this recent statement made by Illinois Senator Dick Durbin. Here, take a listen.
We cannot wait any longer to fix America's broken immigration system. It's been 36 years. 36 years since we passed any meaningful immigration bill.
So, is Senator Durbin entirely accurate here? Has it really been decades since lawmakers passed a bipartisan immigration bill? The fact check team here joins me now. Janae, we start off with you.
So he's right for the most part. Congress actually passed the Immigration Reform and Control Act in 1986, which was 35 years ago. So he's off by a year. Now, that legislation focused on enforcement and amnesty and granted a pathway to permanent residency for almost 3 million undocumented immigrant workers who had been in the U.S. since 1982. It also imposed sanctions on employers who knowingly hired these workers.
And a key word there I picked up on, Janae, pathway. John, you found through your research tonight there are new pathways to citizenship even without a new law in place.
That's right. So original pathways, we have employer sponsorship, military service, of course, marriage to an American citizen, birth in the United States, a lot of things that fall under the lawful permanent resident category. But what Durbin's claim leaves out is since 1986, there have been more retroactive policies that have actually allowed people who are here illegally to gain legal citizenship. A couple of those, we have the Nicaraguan Adjustment and Central American Relief Act of 97, the Haitian Refugee Immigration and Fairness Act from 98, and then we actually have the LIFE Act, or the Legal Immigration Family Equity Act from the year 2000. And of course, an executive order, the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals during the Obama administration in 2012.
John and Janae with the fact check team. Much more on the numbers on these policies coming up in just a bit from the fact check team. Later, we examine DACA and the White House's next move to protect that decade-old policy.
As legal challenges create roadblocks for the Obama administration's DACA policy, President Biden is now taking up the issue. Our fact check team examining how the White House plans to take action tomorrow.
DACA, or Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals, was one of President Obama's defining policies. And now, nearly a decade later, the Biden administration, Janae, is trying to not only protect it, but expand it. And all eyes will be on that policy come tomorrow.
Yeah, so the Biden administration renewed their efforts to prevent folks who were brought into the U.S. illegally as kids from getting deported. So just as you said, President Obama created DACA in 2012, though it's faced legal issues ever since, being accused of bypassing procedural requirements. Now, Biden proposed a rule that might appease legal concerns. It's a 205-page proposal, and it'll be published tomorrow in the Federal Register. The public will have 60 days to review it.
We'll be keeping track of that, of course. And John, immigration reform, always a fiercely debated topic. For some context tonight, you dug into the numbers to figure out the impact of immigration policies over the years.
That's right. So earlier we talked about pathways to citizenship, and the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services Division of Homeland Security has some good data on this. So over 625,000 new citizens in fiscal year 2020. Another 439,000 were granted that last category, lawful permanent residents. We talked about that a little earlier. 2 million were approved for employment authorization. Usually that requires a bachelor's degree. But I want to point something out. Military service gets talked about as a pathway to citizenship. Over the last 5 years, that number's been less than 30,000 that have actually gone through that system.
Pretty low.
The lawful permanent residence category is actually its lowest that it's been in the last 5 years as far as applications. This year they only saw 700,000. With all of this, though, I want to, make sure we understand there's a large concern right now over 12,000 immigrants that were essentially allowed into the country. They're awaiting a court date to be able to go through one of these programs.
We'll certainly keep our eye on that as we move forward. John and Janae, thank you so much. Later from the fact check team tonight, that developing crisis on the southern border and those viral images of border agents on horseback now sparking an internal investigation.
The White House getting a hold of the developing crisis on the southern border. Tonight, the fact-check team investigates the realities on the ground and how federal officials are trying to manage it.
As the crisis continues to unfold in Del Rio, Texas, a lot of discussion around the use of Border Patrol agents on horseback. And John, you spent much of tonight investigating those now viral images. What did you find out?
That's right. So our James Rosen actually talked a little bit earlier about how President Biden has already vowed to discipline some of those Customs and Border Patrol agents. There are photos and video that you've seen circulated through both mainstream and social media. As far as fact-checking goes, a few things to point out. The first is that those longer strands that some folks have seen, especially in the photos, are actually long reins, not whips. They're meant to be able to dismount your horse and make sure that it's not going anywhere. Another thing I wanted to address, and a couple of things that I've actually seen and heard in reporting, is this idea that CBP agents have lassos. Heard one anchor specifically say that they were seeing them being lassoed. Those agents in those photos and videos don't actually have lassos. That's a particular type of rope. And as far as I can tell, looking at their saddles, they don't have any long ropes available to them. Finally, I want to point out that in an NPR interview, the actual photographer said, and I quote, "I've never seen them whip anyone. He was swinging it, but it can be misconstrued when you're looking at the picture." An investigation into the situation is underway, and all the use of mounted CBP agents has been temporarily suspended.
So when we break this all down, when it comes down to their actions and whether or not it broke agency policy, what were you able to find out about that tonight?
So we did dig through their 64-page use of force policy, and they are authorized to escalate force as the situation deems necessary. So respect for human life is emphasized in the policy. They also say officers and agents must use a verbal warning to comply with instructions before they can actually use force. The policy goes on to say that CBP law enforcement personnel have a duty to intervene any use of excessive force by another agent. Now, DHS Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas said those images of agents on horseback do not represent who we are as a country. And again, an investigation is underway.
Certainly a lot of fallout from those images, that is for sure. That is tonight's Fact Check. We want to let you know all documents and resources used in tonight's segment. Those will be posted for you online, available so you can fact check for yourself. Megan?